The desert, what at first glance appears to be nothing more than barren wasteland, is in fact one of the most fascinating landscape forms our planet has to offer. Impressive spectacles sometimes take place in these vegetation-free areas, and life too has found a way to cope with the extreme demands of these inhospitable worlds. And indeed, the deserts still harbor countless mysteries just waiting to be rediscovered and unraveled. Fortunately, we've already had the privilege of unearthing some of these exciting mysteries, and here are some of the most incredible desert discoveries that have been made in the recent past. Before we get started, be sure to hit the like button and ring the notification bell for more videos. Also, stick around until the end to learn about one of the most incredible discoveries to have ever been made in the desert in recent years. Hidden Cave World. In 1974, friends Gary Tennant and Randy Tufts decided to explore the Sonoran Desert. The two students had their sights set on a mysterious subterranean cave, but no one could have guessed in advance which hidden world they were to uncover at the end of the day. So it was that the recreational explorers tracked down a cave system more than 2 miles long that has since been known as Kartchner Caverns State Park. In detail, we come across overwhelming stalactites that have been growing in places for more than 50,000 years. Anyone who now believes that the cave complex was immediately overrun by onlookers after its discovery has made a mistake. In truth, Gary and Randy chose to keep their sensational find a secret for almost 15 years. However, over time they realized that this natural treasure could only be preserved with the help of official authorities, which is why they finally turned to Arizona state parks. In 1988, the public finally found out about the existence of the hidden caves. In the first 3 years alone, more than 750,000 visitors flocked to Kartchner Caverns. However, there are still countless sections that are off-limits. Giant from prehistoric times. Anyone who found themselves in the Sahara around 100 million years ago witnessed a truly frightening sight there. A huge predatory dinosaur that was 11 meters long and weighed 3 tons. According to this, a team of Egyptian and American researchers recently managed to track down the fossil of the prehistoric giant in the Bahariya Formation. It's very likely that the predator belonged to the group of Abelisauridae, which visually showed certain similarities with the mighty T-Rex. In fact, the still nameless species was in the best of company at the time. Millions of years ago, the Sahara was teeming with predatory dinosaurs. However, how the carnivores managed to coexist at that time is not exactly known. They may have specialized in different prey animals, which means that the individual food supply was never scarce. Incidentally, today's desert landscape was much wetter and greener back then. The Sahara probably once embodied a rich jungle world. Lost civilization. In 2011, British explorers uncovered the relics of a long-forgotten civilization in the Libyan part of the Sahara. Among the exciting traces hidden in the hot desert sands for so many centuries were the ruins of more than 100 farms and villages. It's commonly assumed that the settlements were established between the years 1 and 500 AD. It is conceivable that the Berber people of the Garamantes were responsible for the construction of the lost cities. The corresponding buildings support the thesis that these people had a far greater cultural influence than previously assumed. In detail, the researchers came across castle-like buildings, apartments, cemeteries, fields, and complex irrigation systems. During their work, the experts mainly relied on the evaluation of satellite images. In this way, they were able to examine huge areas in detail. Karakoto. During his research trips between 1901 and 1909, the Russian Pyotr Kozlov succeeded in doing what nobody had done for centuries. He tracked down the remains of the medieval city of Karakoto. In the 11th century, the town in the Gobi Desert had made a name for itself as a thriving trading center, and a few decades later, Karakoto fell into the hands of the Mongols. But even under the rule of Genghis Khan's followers, the city continued to flourish. Its end was only heralded by the attack by the Chinese. Back in 1372, Ming Dynasty soldiers diverted the river that had previously supplied the city with the water it needed to survive. When the wells finally dried up, the ruler Karabator recognized the hopeless situation and made a drastic decision. Instead of surrendering to his enemies, he killed his family and then himself. The remaining citizens and soldiers were ultimately killed by the invading Chinese. News from Nazareth. Nazareth has an incomparable status in the Christian faith. Accordingly, the city in northern Israel is referred to in all Gospels as the homeland of Jesus and the place of residence of his parents and brothers and sisters. For a long time, experts believe that historic Nazareth was little more than a small village. However, recent research shows that the town was significantly larger than previously thought. So Nazareth probably embodied a flourishing metropolis in the middle of the desert, and the way of life of the residents must have differed significantly from the habits of their neighbors. A very conservative, anti-Roman mood prevailed within the population, and the Jewish laws were also observed more strictly than elsewhere. While it was still common practice in the neighboring city of Sepphoris to fertilize the fields with human excrement, this was strictly forbidden in Nazareth due to religious regulations. Stone altar. An ancient stone altar has been recovered in Jordan dating back around 2,800 years. However, the inscription that adorns the artifact poses some puzzles to the experts. While the words were written in Moabite, the numbers come from ancient Egyptian. One of the inscriptions tells of the sacking of the city of Astaroth. The other is a little more enigmatic. It states that 4,000 strange men were scattered and abandoned. Some experts believe the recovered artifact is evidence of Moab's rebellion against the kingdom of Israel. Although the uprising is mentioned in the Hebrew Bible, from a purely archaeological point of view, there's been no evidence that it actually took place. Lake Dolores Water Park. Children's bright eyes, happy families, boisterous hustle and bustle. You won't find all of this at Lake Dolores Water Park for a long time. In the early 1960s, businessman Bob Byers had a clever idea. He wanted to build the first water park in the United States on the eastern edge of the Mojave Desert. Consequently, one of the biggest attractions of the facility was the many thrilling slides. However, as the park began to attract fewer visitors, it was sold to a group of investors in 1990. They planned to build a 1950s theme park on the site, but financial problems resulted in the property being returned to the Byers family. From then on, attempts were made to breathe new life into the facility under the name Discovery Water Park, but even the $400,000 renovation could not stop the final demise. Nowadays, there's no trace of the water slides and attractions. Since people keep coming to the site and removing metal from the buildings, the water park today resembles a bizarre landscape of ruins. Incidentally, the vandals don't have a particularly difficult time. Since the property isn't fenced in, it can be entered without any problems. What will happen to the site in the future is still up in the air. Railway Cemetery. In the late 19th century, the Bolivian city of Uyuni benefited greatly from the expansion of the country's first railway line. At that time, valuable raw materials and metals were transported from the mines to the transshipment points at the port via the rails. However, this branch of industry collapsed completely in the 1940s. After more and more mines had closed their doors, the previously heavily used railway lines were no longer needed. Instead of scrapping the railways professionally, they were shut down without further ado and left to deteriorate naturally. So it is that since then, there have been around 100 locomotives on the foothills of the Salar de Uyuni salt flats, which, however, only slowly disintegrate due to the prevailing climate. Every now and then, residents visit the site to help themselves to scrap metal, but many tourists also take the opportunity to take a look at the largest railway cemetery in the world. Breathing sand. Scientists' latest discovery reminds us once again that the desert is by no means as lifeless as it first appears. And by that, we don't mean the animals that make their home in the endless sandy landscapes, but the dunes themselves. We've known for a long time that these mounds of sand grow, move, and even interact with each other. A complex probe by the experts now shows that the sand dunes are literally breathing. When it's dry, the wind lifts the top layers of sand, causing the stored moisture to move down the dune. The water vapor seeps between the grains of sand, and as soon as the wind blows, the pressure conditions change so that the moisture is pressed into the pores of the dune. This breathing of the sand probably helps the microorganisms to survive within the dune landscapes. New desert spider. The Encyclopedia of Creepy Crawlies has one more representative. In the Indian Thar Desert, researchers recently succeeded in discovering a new species of spider. In detail, it's a jumping spider, and as the name suggests, these little creatures are known for ambushing their prey and then overpowering them with one leap. Pseudomogris sudhi, the spider's official name, is at home on dry grass and is just 4 millimeters long. While the male specimens have a dark brown head with light hairs, the head of the female greets in a bright shade of yellow. How many unknown spiders still hide in the Thar Desert is uncertain. The spider fauna there is virtually unexplored. Babylon's last king. Traces of the past are still visible. Deep in the heart of the Saudi Arabian desert, experts came across an ancient image that shows us the very last king of Babylon. Carved around 2,550 years ago, the accompanying inscription provides us with the necessary information about the mysterious carving. Nabonidus ruled between the years 556 and 539 BC. In addition to the royal scepter, we also recognize 4 significant symbols on the basalt stone: a snake, a flower, a sun, and a crescent moon. The experts suspect that these signs have a religious context, but their exact background is not fully understood. The same applies to the fate of the king. Whether he was killed or exiled after the invasion of the Persians and the fall of Babylon is unclear. The last secure record of the ruler's life reads, "Everything that Nabonidus had created in his life was scattered as ashes by the wind in all directions." Immortal plant. The circumstances prevailing in the Namibian desert can be described as extreme without hesitation. One of the most bizarre plants on our planet shows how it's still possible to defy the scorching heat for millions of years, the so-called welwitschia. This plant species, which only grows in the Namib desert, can live for several hundred years. However, it only ever has a single pair of leaves, which fan out over time, which makes it seem as if the welwitschia calls many different leaves its own. The 2 leaves can be more than 2.5 meters long, and it's believed that particularly large specimens live for up to 2,000 years. It's likely that welwitschia mainly absorbs water from the ground, but the influence of dew, which is absorbed via the leaves, may also play some role in the supply. Aralcum. On the border between Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, we find what is probably the youngest desert in the world, the Aralcum. Where we see mainly salt crust, sand, and forgotten shipwrecks today was where the mighty Aral Sea once stood. With a size of 68,000 square kilometers, it was one of the largest inland lakes in the world until the early 1960s. Over time, however, the Soviet Union decided to tap into the Aral Sea to supply water to the vast cotton-growing area. In this way, the water volume was reduced by 90%, while the salinity quadrupled in the same breath. One of the consequences of this development is the increased occurrence of dust storms. The blown dust particles form clouds up to 400 kilometers long, carrying hazardous substances such as pesticides, heavy metals, and even radioactive material to areas more than 2,000 kilometers away. Arabian Desert. The Arabian Desert is home to so many wonders and mysteries that we could fill an entire video just on this topic. One of the most fascinating sites is in Abu Dhabi and is called Bida bin Saud. This ancient caravan site featured sophisticated irrigation systems and served as an important hub for traders and travelers for at least 5,000 years. In the same region, we also come across Bronze Age tombs and Garn Bint Sound, a 36-meter-high rock formation that also served as a cemetery. After death, only the highest-ranking members of society were allowed to be buried at the summit of this natural elevation. No less interesting is the hilly archaeological park, whose roots go back to the Bronze Age. A few years ago, around 3,000-year-old fingerprints were discovered here. They probably come from the workers who once built a wall there. Fairy circles. If you were to take a hike through the Namibian desert, you'd eventually come across a strange area of land that, to this day, has never been explained. These mysterious circular structures on the ground are called fairy circles by the locals, but no one knows where they came from. If you were to look at the circles and take them at face value, it appears as though they were created by some unseen force. That's because there's no natural explanation for how they came to be. They don't appear to have been created by any natural process that's currently known. To this day, the origins of the so-called fairy circles remain unknown, but that doesn't mean there haven't been numerous theories that propose where they came from. Some people claim that creatures like termites could have caused damage to the soil, resulting in strange circles. Others believe that harmful fungi could be causing grass and other vegetation to refuse to grow. However, neither of these theories has been proven. Another far-fetched idea is that underground gases are causing the circles, or even that ostriches or zebras have been rolling around on the ground. None of these explanations seem to make sense, nor could any of them realistically cause such perfect circles to be formed. Another strange fact is that the circles never overlap one another. They're all separate and stand apart from the others. We don't know what this may mean for the natural landscape, but it has led many to believe that the circles are being created by an unknown force. The circles can achieve diameters of anywhere from 2 meters to 20 meters. They'll appear for a period of about 75 years before they disappear, never to be seen again. Forgotten Mosque. Covering an area of 12,000 square kilometers, the Negev Desert covers around 60% of Israel's national territory. We now know that the area also houses one of the oldest mosques in the world. The square room, oriented towards Mecca, was discovered during construction work. The small building was built around 1,200 years ago and offered space for around 12 believers. The ruins of a luxurious residential building found nearby suggest that the mosque was once used by the social elite. Band of Holes. The Band of Holes is a highly mysterious area in Peru that's home to around 7,000 holes that have been dug into the desert floor. Each of the holes is estimated to be around 2 meters deep, with the overall area of holes being around 1.5 kilometers long and about 20 meters wide. The holes were first discovered as researchers were looking through the Pisco Valley of the Nazca Plateau. Who created these holes or what purpose they serve has never been determined. Some believe that they could have been used for some sort of ceremonial or religious purposes. However, others believe they may be nothing more than a burial ground for the people who lived there many years ago. All we know for sure is that the pits were dug between the 15th and 16th centuries, but we don't know if they would have been dug by the Inca, Nazca, or Paracas people. In reality, they may not have been dug by any of these people and could belong to a settlement that has been lost to time. Film City. Film City in Qatar is arguably one of the most secluded film sets around. Several hours' drive from the capital Doha, the village in the middle of the desert initially looks like an ancient Bedouin town. It's not exactly easy to find out which productions have already been filmed here. Depending on who you ask, the answers will vary greatly. What is certain is that where Film City is now, there was once a fishing village. However, there's no trace of film and series stars in the large backdrop city. Most of the time, you only meet a few security guards who keep a close eye on the property. Home of Abraham. British archaeologists recently uncovered a massive complex near the ancient city of Ur, located in what is now Iraq. It's one of the oldest Sumerian city foundations ever, dating back to 4000 BC. One of the most impressive buildings is undoubtedly the pompous ziggurat of the moon god Nana. This massive, 25-meter-high step temple was built more than 4,000 years ago. In the Old Testament, we learn that Abraham, the so-called progenitor of Israel, also came from Ur. The complex mentioned at the beginning is one of the most important discoveries of the recent past. With a length of almost 80 meters, this must have been an extremely important building. It may have been used for administrative or religious purposes. However, why the building was erected almost 20 kilometers outside the actual capital has yet to be discovered. Abandoned prison. In 1952, the U.S. government had the so-called Boron Air Force Station built in the U.S. state of California. The military facility was then abandoned in the mid-1970s, only to be converted into a prison a short time later. Until the year 2000, male convicts who had committed comparatively minor crimes were housed here. The security precautions were correspondingly relaxed. There were no fences or watchtowers here. In fact, not even the cells could be locked. However, after the jail finally closed its doors, the penal institution was left completely to its own devices. In fact, it's strictly forbidden to enter the facility without official permission. Anyone who goes to this lost place anyway must expect a hefty fine or a prison sentence. Sanded church. In the late 13th century, the clergy in Jutland, Denmark, decided to dedicate a church to St. Lawrence. So it happened that the church got a magnificent tower, a sacristy, a porch, and even a small cemetery. The problem? The church was surrounded by fields and meadows, so there was practically nothing that could have saved it from the progressive silting up. Over time, this became such a problem that the church's entrance had to be dug up periodically. In the late 18th century, the inhabitants gave in to the superiority of nature. The church was completely demolished, except for the church tower. Presumably, some remnants of that time are still slumbering under the sand today. In addition to the original floor, this also includes the tombstones of ecclesiastical authorities. Even if the church no longer serves its original purpose, services are still held here during the summer months under the open sky. Which of the featured desert discoveries intrigued you the most? As always, let us know your thoughts, suggestions, and feedback on today's video in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell to stay up to date from now on. Are you interested in learning more about the most exciting discoveries of all time? Please take a look at the other videos of our channel, which you can access by clicking on one of the pictures in the credits. Thank you for watching. Take care and see you next time.